Chapter 6. So far, I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff. We talked about Jesus and how he, his deity in the first chapter. He turned water into wine. We talked about him with the Samaritans, and now we're going to get into his feeding of the 5,000. That's what this chapter is about. So beginning in verse 1. It says, after these things, Jesus went over to the Sea of Galilee, which is also called the Sea of Tiberias. Now, the Sea of Galilee actually has 3 different names. They called it the Sea of Galilee, they called it the Sea of Tiberias, and they even called it the Lake of, it's hard to pronounce, Gennesaret or something like that. It's actually a freshwater lake. Okay, or it's fresh water. It's not as actual salt. It's not salt water. It lies in the northern part of Israel, and it supplies fresh water to the northern part of Israel and parts of Jordan as well. I mean, and it's a pretty good sized lake. It lies about 700 feet below sea level, and it is the world's largest freshwater lake, and or at that level, or lowest, not largest, but lowest freshwater lake. And it's the second lowest sea or lake after the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is actually lower, but the Sea of Galilee is still 700 feet below sea level, and that's pretty ways down. Where the Dead Sea is 1,403 feet below sea level, so almost double for the Dead Sea. It's 35 miles in circumference, so a healthy person could rent a bike and pedal around the Sea of Galilee in a day. It's 35 miles in circumference. And so when Jesus and his disciples, when it says they come to the Sea of Galilee, well, if you remember in the last chapter they were in Jerusalem, so they would have ended up on the south side at this point, and then it says they went to the other side of the sea, so they would get in and went to the north side. Okay. Now, so he went with his disciples, and but this was right after, if you recall, he sent the apostles out. He gave them power to heal. This was back in one of the other gospels, and we'll talk about that more here in a minute. But he sent them out and gave them the power to cast out demons, heal the sick, and to tell others about the coming kingdom of God. And then they returned to him at this at this timeline to try to tell him about all the things that they've done. When they went across the Sea of Galilee, they were in the town of Bethsaida, which means house of fishing. There was actually at least two cities called Bethsaida in Israel, but this is the one that was just east of Capernaum on the north shore is what this one here is talking about. So that's what you could find where he sent them out, and that would have been in Luke chapter 9, verses 1 and 2 says, one day Jesus called together his 12 disciples and gave them power and authority to cast out all demons and heal all diseases. Then he sent them out to tell everyone about the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And it's also recorded in Mark 6, verse 30 and 32, that the apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all the things that they had done and taught. And then Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest. And he said this because there were so many people coming and doing and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. So that's what this timeline is. They were trying to be alone, and because they didn't have time to eat or anything like that, and they were just trying to go off and rest. Pick up in verse 2. And a great multitude still followed him, because they saw the signs which he performed on those who were sick. So this great multitude, even though he was trying to get away, they still followed him. and they wanted him to heal their sick. They wanted to see what he would do next, and they just wanted to see the signs. You know, they didn't follow him for who he was. They wanted to follow him for the things that he was doing. And so, even though he left, you know, they were still following him. And you know, Jesus could have you know, said, "Get away, get away. We're trying to," but no. It says that he had compassion on them. And so in Matthew it says 14:14, he was moved with compassion for them. And so he didn't rest. He stayed and he ministered to them. Even though they needed rest, he sacrificed and his, you know, his own well-being to minister to them. And he received, and in Luke 9 it says he received them and he spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who were sick. So he still was continuing his ministry because God's work still needed to be done. And to him, that was his food. You know, we've talked about that in earlier chapters. So he was continuing to do his work. Verse 3 and 4. And Jesus went up on the mountain and sat there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, were near. Now we've already had one Passover, and now this is saying that the Passover is near. So this would have been about a year into his ministry. So a third of it into his ministry is when this was taking place. The Passover, you know, like I said, it was near, and they just finished another feast of the Jews. So John is not just a diary where it's going step by. It's more like an overview of what Jesus has done. Later on, we'll find out that it says that if they wrote everything that he'd done, there wouldn't be any books to contain it. So John was just kind of hitting the highlights of what Jesus was doing, and the other three Gospels did the same thing. They just hit highlights of what they noticed or what they remember, and that's kind of how the Gospels are written. Verse 5 and 6. Then Jesus, having lifted up his eyes and seeing the great multitude was coming toward him, said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" And he said this to test him, for he knew what he was about to do. So, you think that Jesus was just talking to Philip to try to start a private conversation? Or you think he said it loud enough for everybody to hear him? I think he said it loud enough for everybody to hear him.
Probably.
You know, he already knew what he was going to do, so he was just, testing to see. Because the others, we're going to find out the other disciples answered as well. So, they did that. But in Mark 6, 35 through 37, it kind of told it a bit like this. It said, "Late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, 'This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat.' But Jesus said, 'You feed them.' 'With what?' they asked. 'We don't we'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people.'" So, the rest of the disciples, they were talking to him as well, and he was like, "Feed them." But in verse 7 here in John, this is how Philip answered. And I think he was answering what they said back in Mark. We'd have to work months, because Philip said, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may receive a little. So I think he was telling them, we have to work months. He said, well, not even 200 denarii would even do this. And denarii was 1 day's wage. If they worked 1 day, they got a denarius is the single for it. And he was saying 200 of them wouldn't be enough. So, 200 days worth of work would not be enough to feed all of them, is what he was saying. And, verse 8 says, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But where are they among so many?" And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, and the men sit down, about 5,000 in number. Now, this said the men sit down, so he was counting the men, and the men were 5,000. That's not counting the women and the children that was with him. So there was probably somewhere around 15,000 people or more, if you count the men. Say each of the men had one wife and then one child. I mean, that's 15,000 right there. So that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. But Matthew 14:21 was said there was women and children there as well. So we know there was more than just the men. Now it says was Andrew describing what was Andrew describing when he said, "There's a boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish"? Well, does anybody know what the barley loaves would be? Bread. But they were more like a little roll size. Okay, it wasn't like a big loaf. And plus, there was wheat and there was barley. Barley was more for a poor person, where the wheat was more, so the boy didn't have a lot of money. His barley loaves were real small, and he had 2 fish to go with it. But that boy was willing to give it all to Jesus. Do we do the same? Are we willing to give it all for Jesus? And that's a hard question to ask. I mean, but I believe the boy was tremendously blessed that he was willing to give it all for him. And why did Andrew just find this boy? Well, if you look in the count in Mark chapter 6, Jesus had told the other disciples to go and look for bread among the crowd. And this is how it says this. He said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they knew, they said 5 fish and 2 loaves. So they searched the whole crowd, and all they found was this boy having these barley loaves and 2 fish. Out of all this crowd, that's all they found. And Jesus didn't even ask them for fish. He just asked them to go and find bread. So apparently they were just looking for any food they could find. And this is what they found. So they reported back, this was a kid's meal. So they're not, this is a boy's meal. So it's not going to be huge. The fish may even have been small. Yeah.
It's a happy meal.
Yeah, it's like a happy meal, exactly. And so, but Jesus, as you're going to find out in a minute, he took that little bit and multiplied it. So if we look at verse 11, it says, "Then Jesus took the loaves, and having given thanks, distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting, and likewise of the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were filled, he said to the disciples, 'Gather up the pieces that remain, so that nothing is lost.'" Now, do we really believe this account? That's in our hearts. Do we really think that Jesus can multiply what we have?
It's been proven over and over.
Yeah, over and over, exactly.
What are some times? What would you like to share?
I mean, he's done a lot like that. From my growing up to where I've come from, I was a foster child, in and out of foster care, drug addict parents. And he's taken that and, through over the years, led me to this. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. A lot of in between, but yeah. From nothing to this. It's great.
My dad was needing some money for a medical procedure, and he didn't have the money, and he didn't tell anybody. Just out of nowhere, somebody at his church said, "I was led to give you this," and handed him an envelope. And when he opened up the envelope, it was the exact amount he needed for the surgery. And he didn't tell him he needed it, but God knew. He multiplied, and and that's what he's doing. You just be faithful, and he's gonna supply. And that's
It's like our prayer request that we've seen multiple things get answered just since we've been meeting together.
You may read this story and you're like, well, how can anyone feed 5,000 people?
15,000.
15,000.
Right.
If you count the women. Even today, if you have to feed 200 people, you're like, what are we going to do? You know, but
I used to get praying.
yeah, you know, but you know, Jesus fed these 15,000 people with just a Happy Meal, you know. So that, you know, that's amazing, and that's the kind of God that we serve. We serve a God who can do the impossible, and a lot of times, you know, and I don't know why, maybe human nature, that when God answers a need, we're so amazed instead of saying, our God can do that. You know, we're like, you know, we don't know how He did it, but He did it, and we still, you know, just look at it like, how? You know, but God, you know, God's the creator of the universe, so He could have fed them with nothing. You know, He could have made rocks into bread if He wanted to, but He chose to use this boy who was now, you know, recorded in Scripture, and you know,
The Happy Meal.
yeah, with a Happy Meal.
I'll never look at that chapter again. The same.
Yeah, you're gonna think Happy Meal every time, no?
I'm gonna put Happy Meal.
Yeah.
Fish fillets.
Fish fillets.
But yeah. Chicken nuggets.
That's right.
But we, you know, we call something a miracle when something's done that exceeds our expectations. And you know, a baby can't run a marathon, but could God make a baby run a marathon? Oh, sure He could.
It might be fun to watch.
It might be fun to watch, exactly. But you know, Jesus Himself, sometimes we forget this. He was the creator. He was at creation. Everything was made through Him, by Him, and for Him. And He wasn't a created being. He wasn't a creature. He is the creator. And in Colossians 1:15 through 17, it says, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. Through Him, through Him, God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can see and the things that we can't, such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through Him and for Him. He existed before anything else, and He holds all creation together.
What chapter was that, Colossians?
That is Colossians 1:15 and 17. So, you know, He holds the very atoms together. You know, it says everything. He holds everything, all creation together. So, you know, water is H2O. He holds the hydrogen and oxygen together to make that water. He holds it together. And so feeding the thousands of people would have been nothing for Him. But yet, a lot of times we still get so amazed at the things that He does. Because it's beyond our understanding a lot of times. Moving on to verse 13. So they gathered them up, all the leftovers, and there were 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves that were left over by those who had eaten. So when He gathered it up, there were 12 baskets full left.
So there wasn't any fish left?
It doesn't say, but
People like their protein.
yeah, but it could have been.
There were only 2 fish, right?
Yeah, but 12 baskets full were left. I mean, that's amazing, right? Is there a significance about that? 12 baskets?
12 disciples,
Yeah.
they got to eat
It's perfect.
a basket.
A basket for
They got their own Happy Meal.
All right, so it's not explicit here, but numbers do mean something in the Bible. Everywhere you see numbers, it means something. So if the significance of this 12 baskets, it also requires us knowing the other time when He fed the 4,000. Because He fed twice. He fed the 5,000 one time and the 4,000 another time. And the story of the 4,000 can be found in Mark chapter 8. And in Mark chapter 8 it says, about this time another large crowd had gathered, and where He's at this time is He's at what they call Decapolis, which is on the east side of Galilee. It's more of a Gentile type place. where the Gentiles and mingled with some of the Jews, but it was more of a Gentile area. And it said that, and the people ran out of food again. And Jesus called the disciples and told them, I feel sorry for these people. They have been here with me for 3 days, and they have nothing left to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will faint along the way, for some of them have come a long distance. And the disciples replied, how are we supposed to find enough food to feed them out here in the wilderness? And Jesus asked, how much bread do you have? 7 loaves, they replied. So Jesus told all the people to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves, gave thanks, and broke them into pieces, and gave them to the disciples, who distributed the bread to the crowd. A few small fish were found too. So Jesus also blessed these and told the disciples to distribute them. They ate as much as they wanted. Afterwards, the disciples picked up 7 large baskets of leftover food. And there were about 4,000 men in the crowd that day, and Jesus sent them home after they had eaten. Now, so this happened in the Decapolis. The feeding of the 5,000 happened on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, where mostly Jewish. So the 12 baskets represents the 12 tribes of Israel. So you have the 12 tribes, they picked up 12 baskets. The 7 large baskets full, it says large, the 7 large baskets, you have to go all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 7. There were 7 Gentile nations that God said he was going to drive out from the children of Israel. And in Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 1, it says, and when the Lord your God brings you to the land you are about to enter and occupy, he will clear away many nations ahead of you, the Hittites, the Gershites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. These 7 nations are greater and more numerous than you. So he drove out he said he's going to drive out those 7. Well, we know from history that, because Israel didn't do what they were supposed to, they kind of intermingled with them, so they lost their identity. But this is the region that they were at, and they picked up 7 large. Now, the Greek word here translated large baskets, at the Decapolis was more like duffel bag fulls. Huge. Okay? And so the 12 were just small baskets full, because there are more Gentiles in the world than there are. So God is saying, my salvation is open to all. And so there is a significance to why it was 12 here and then 7 in the Gentile area. So I thought that was amazing when I was studying that, and I learned that. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And so that was the second feeding. And anybody have any questions on that?
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah. So Jesus is the hero of both these stories.
Oh, yeah.
But the boy was willing to give all he had, and Jesus multiplied it. So so the boy probably had enough to take back home to his family. So, and that's what we should do in our everyday life, is we need to give all to God. Even, what little we have, we need to give to him, because, he's going to multiply. Maybe not so much like, I'm not talking about finances, I'm just talking about multiplied within us. Yeah. I'm not preaching one of those prosperity gospels or anything like that. It could,
basket.
yeah. But
Where's your basket?
yeah, where's my basket? But we always, God's going to make sure we have what we need. We may not always have excess over, but we're going to have what we need, and we just need to rely on him. And that goes back to that. We'll talk more about it in a minute. But that story with the manna, he told them to gather only what you need, no more, because he wanted them to learn to rely on him every day for their provision. And when they gathered more than what they were supposed to, that was a lack of faith, and they found worms in it the next day. So, God wanted to teach them to to rely on him. Verse 14. Then the people, having seen the sign that Jesus did, said, "This is truly the prophet who came into the world." Now it doesn't say a prophet, it says the prophet. And there's a significance to "the" because Moses in Deuteronomy again, chapter 18, told the children of Israel that the Lord will raise up from you a prophet like me from among your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. He was telling them that God's going to raise up a prophet. So when they said the prophet, they're talking about the one that Moses was talking about. And it says, why would they consider Jesus to be the prophet that Moses was talking about? And when you read Exodus chapter 16, there was another large crowd and they were hungry. But beginning in verse 1, it says, "Then the whole community of Israel set out from Elam and journeyed to the wilderness of Sin, between Elam and Mount Sinai. They arrived there on the 15th day of the second month, 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. There, too, the whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. 'If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt,' they moaned. 'There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into the wilderness to starve, all of us to death.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day. I will test them in this to see whether or not they follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they will gather enough food for twice as much as usual, because they need to rest on the Sabbath.' And so Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, 'By evening you will realize that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. In the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaints, which are against him, not against us. What have we done that you should be complaining about us?' Then Moses added, 'The Lord will give you meat to eat in the evening and bread to satisfy you in the morning, for he has heard all your complaints against him. What have we done? Yes, your complaints are against the Lord and not against us.' Then Moses said to Aaron, 'Announce to the entire community of Israel, present yourselves before the Lord, for he has heard your complaining.' And as Aaron spoke to the whole community of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and there they could see the awesome glory of the Lord in the cloud. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'I have heard the Israelites' complaints. Now tell them, in the evening you will have meat to eat, and in the morning you will have all the bread you want. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God.' That evening vast numbers of quail flew in and covered the camp. The next morning the area around the camp was wet with dew, and when the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. The Israelites were puzzled when they saw it. 'What is it?' they asked one another. They had no idea what it was. And Moses told them, 'It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat.' So God provided quail in the evening, and manna is what was named for bread in the morning. And I read that because we're going to kind of get into what Jesus is telling them as we move along. But just know that that's what they were referring to about the prophet, because they saw it as Moses providing the food or the bread when it was really God. Verse 15. Then Jesus, knowing that they were about to come and take him by force and make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. They wanted to make him king. Now, he's already king, but it wasn't God's will for him to be crowned king at this moment on earth, because what they wanted is they wanted to crown him king. They wanted him to lead a rebellion against the Romans, defeat the Romans, and then supply all their needs, bread and all that.
They were looking for an earthly king.
They were looking for the earthly king, exactly. And that wasn't what he came into the world to do. So he wasn't coming to free the Jews politically or physically, or he came to free from the bondage of sin, not the bondage of the Romans. And so he withdrew. Why do you think he went off by himself alone?
Right.
Why do you think he needed to pray at this point?
Because he was frustrated.
You think it was frustration?
I think it was trying to show the people that he cared about him, he had compassion for him, and they were not seeing why he was there. They weren't
He
seeing.
might have been looking for direction from God.
Yeah. You think he might have been tempted?
Oh, yeah.
Because the Bible says he was tempted in every way that we are. And if he could have been made king now, then maybe he wouldn't have to endure the cross. So he went to pray to get God's guidance to find out what God's will is. And he got it. Because it wasn't to be made king now.
I think I feel like he also was frustrated
He
too
could have been.
because he had provided for the needs for
Mhm.
these people, and goes on and he tries to teach them and stuff, and they just don't listen.
All they
Yeah.
see is what they're getting out of it.
Yeah, they don't get it. Yeah.
But did they realize that he was a righteous God, a holy God?
They didn't at this time, no.
Well, who they want him to do?
Do?
You know, he's a holy God, a righteous God.
He
You know,
is.
he's everything.
He is.
He's not to me, he's not a Jew. He
Mm-mm.
might have been a Jew, an earthly Jew.
Yeah,
But he's holy.
he is. And at this point, they didn't see that. They couldn't see past the nose on their face most of the time.
Oh, what? They didn't know.
They didn't know at this point.
And we know what's going on because we got the Bible.
Right, they didn't have that.
We're looking at
I mean,
it
they had the Old
hindsight.
Testament. We're looking back,
Yeah.
but they're living it, so they didn't know. At this point, he was fairly new. They didn't really know who he was. And he keeps trying to tell them, but they were looking more in their own needs instead of, physical needs instead of, they wasn't thinking spiritual and things like that. So that's why,
That's why.
yeah.
Oh, glad I got that straight.
Yeah. But Hebrews chapter 4 says, by then, since we have a great high priest who has entered heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced the same testings that we do, yet he was without sin. So all the ways that we are tempted, we're tempted by money, we're tempted by fame, we're tempted by, lots of things. It says Jesus was tempted the same way, but he chose not to, he did not sin. So I think, he could be frustrated and had to go pray, because frustration can sometimes lead to sin. But, he went to pray and he found out what God's will is, and so he knew it wasn't to be made king, and he knew frustration, that he was comforted by God, so he could overcome that. So prayer is one way that we can fight temptation, because we're all tempted. But how many of us that when we're tempted, we immediately go to prayer and ask for strength to overcome it? I don't know how many times that I've just cried out, God help me. I mean, I'm tempted and, I can't do it on my own power. I can't resist. But then, God just kind of overwhelms you, and then it gives you the strength to say no.
He says in James that he'll give us a way of escape.
Yeah, it does. And, it says resist the devil and he will flee. So once we're tempted, if we resist and turn to God, then that temptation will subside. But going to God means we have to go to God in prayer. We have to be in His Word and things like that. But one thing we can't do is dwell on that temptation. When we dwell on the temptation, we're going to grab, our flesh is going to gravitate toward it. But here it says that when they wanted to take him by force, he withdrew immediately, and he went and prayed. And we need to do that as well. We need to pray. 2 Peter 2:9 It says, so you see, the Lord knows how to rescue godly people from their trials, even while keeping the wicked under punishment until the day of the final judgment. So, God knows how to rescue us. But do we turn to Him for that rescue? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we give into the sin. What makes us give into the sin? We have to figure that out and ask God for strength to overcome that. And prayer is a way to do it. Jesus had to pray, and we do too. I mean, if Jesus had to pray, how much more do we need to pray? All right, verse 16. Now when evening came, okay, so he was up there praying, and evening came, his disciples went down to the sea. Didn't say Jesus was with them, it said the disciples went down to the sea. And having boarded a boat, were going across the sea to Capernaum. And it already had become dark, and Jesus had not come with them. All right, so evening came, the disciples got in the boat and they left. They left Jesus, on the mountain, and assuming he's still praying. And Capernaum was more like a home base for them. That's where they their ministry, they stayed, and their ministry branched out from Capernaum. Why do you think the disciples left without Jesus?
Jesus didn't want to go.
We'll find out more about that in just a minute.
Because he was going to walk on water or
Well,
something.
they know when he goes to pray, he goes.
He goes to pray.
Yeah, and they didn't want to sit around.
Yeah.
Or maybe he couldn't go to Capernaum because they were still trying to make him king.
Okay. We'll get to the account for that here in just a minute. Verse 18 says, and the sea became rough because a great wind was blowing. And so they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, and they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat. And they were terrified. But he said to them, I am, fear not. Then they were glad to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was on land where they were going. Now we know from the other Gospels about Peter walking on water during this time and things like that. John's Gospel doesn't go into that, but we do know that. One account of it is in Mark, and the other account is in Matthew. We're going to read that in just a minute. But Jesus says, I am, fear not. Well, the Greek word literally means that I am all existent. I am, God, basically. I am is the exact thing that God told Moses at the burning bush. I am that I am. And Jesus is saying, I am. And so, some translation says, it is me or whatever. But the Greek word is actually saying, I am. I'm the all-existent one. But the other Gospels, beginning with Mark chapter 6, verse 47 through 52, it says, late that night, the disciples were in their boats in the middle of the lake, and Jesus was alone on land. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and the waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. He intended to go past them, but when they saw him walking on the water, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. They were all terrified when they saw him, but Jesus spoke to them at once. Don't be afraid, he said. Take courage, I am. Then he climbed into the boat, and the wind stopped, and they were totally amazed, for they still didn't understand the significance of the miracle of the loaves. Their heart was too hard to take it in. So that's one account. And then in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 through 33, it's an even fuller account. It says, immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples take the boat and cross the river. So Jesus told them to go. That's why they left him. He said, you go ahead and go before me. And he said, go ahead and go across like while I send the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray again. Night fell when he was there alone. Immediately the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting the heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. And Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" And when he climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshiped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. Now, there are kind of like about at least 6 miracles that were going on here.
Yeah, so why wouldn't John post that, write that?
Yeah.
Those were very important facts.
Yeah, I know.
Very vital. So I always wonder why he never posted that in there.
I mean, he posted him walking on water because I guess this is all pointing to Jesus and not so much the disciples, maybe. I mean,
But again, that's showing Jesus.
Yeah, I agree.
The faith a man has to have
Yeah.
in Christ.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why John didn't
Maybe he
record it.
didn't include it because Peter acted like a fool. He didn't want to make Peter.
Maybe
mad.
him and Peter were in, maybe John and Peter were in competition because if you recall when they run to the tomb,
Was John the one that kind of felt
Yeah.
like, no?
yeah, well, when they were running to the tomb, it says the one who Jesus loved got there first. Did
And he
Peter
was
come
ashamed.
behind?
He's like, I'm going to leave that one.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows?
I thought Mary was the one that when it.
She did, but she went and told them, and then the disciples ran to the tomb. And John records that the disciple whom Jesus loved, which he's talking about himself,
Oh.
beat Peter to the tomb.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Here's a little test.
yeah, maybe. But one miracle is it was night, and Jesus saw them straining 3 or 4 miles away. I mean, that's a miracle in itself. Because, I mean, they didn't have boating lights like we do now.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
So,
Blow.
yeah, so
Blow.
that's one miracle. Because, you know, like I said,
Give him light, yeah.
yeah, they were 3 or 4 miles away. Jesus walked on the water. I mean, that's a miracle. Jesus had Peter walk on the water.
Even more so.
And even this, you know, it says when Jesus was a ways off, they thought it was a ghost. So when Peter sank, he said, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out. Jesus wasn't even near him.
Right.
Somehow he was able to reach out and pull him up. So that, you know, to me, that's a miracle. And as soon as he got in the boat, the wind stopped. But then John's account said they were immediately on land. So somehow, when Jesus got in the boat, the wind stopped, and automatically they're on land. I mean, that's
They teleported.
yeah. So I mean, those are all pretty big miracles. If you read into the story, that's what it's saying. And so that's, you know, that's an amazing thing in itself. But Peter began to sink. Why?
Faith.
Lost faith.
Yep.
He started
Took his
looking.
eyes off it.
Yeah, he started looking around at things and took his eyes off Jesus. And do we do the same? When the worries of this world come crashing in, we look at the worries, and a lot of times we take our eyes off Jesus. But if we keep our eyes on Jesus, the worries take care of themselves. Jesus takes care of them. And that's a lesson that we need to, take from this. When basically all hell breaks loose around us, if we keep our eyes on Jesus, that can't harm us. Okay? The Bible says that the gates of hell can't even prevail against us. But we have to keep our eyes on Jesus. And we have to look to Him. So instead of praying for the winds and the waves to die down, maybe we need to pray, "God, enable me to keep my eyes on you. Help me keep my eyes on you." And the rest of the stuff will, take care of itself. And when we're straining, against this stuff, it's all futile unless Jesus is on board with us. When Jesus is with us, we can handle that stuff. But when Jesus is not, then we struggle. So we need to keep our eyes on Jesus. All right, verse 22. The next day, the people who were standing on the other side of the sea realized that no other boat, so they were stayed on that side of the sea, and they realized no other boat had left with the disciples. The disciples left, no other boat, so they thought Jesus was still there. Okay? And it says no other boat had been there except the one the disciples had boarded, and that Jesus was not on board the boat with the disciples, but the disciples had gone away alone. Then other boats came from Tiberias, near the place where they ate the bread after Jesus had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they also boarded boats and came to Capernaum, seeking Jesus. And when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said, Rabbi, when did you come here? Or it might be better translated as, how did you get here? Because he never boarded a boat, but yet he was already there. And so these people followed him to the other side. It may not have been the whole group. It may have just been a small group that went, because they got in boats, however many could fit in the boat or whatever. But they all went to the other side, and and then they saw him there. And rabbis, they didn't leave without their disciples. The disciples were with them, so they knew that if the disciples went, Jesus would probably be there with them. But they just didn't realize it had been there that quick. Now, so it was a miraculous. So the feeding was a miraculous sign, and Jesus on the other side, that was even more of a miraculous sign, because they couldn't figure out how that happened. And verse 26, Jesus answered them and said, Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate loaves and were filled. So you appreciate the feeding, but not what it was pointing to, is what he's saying. You appreciated me feeding you, but you don't know the significance of it. You're coming to me for the wrong reasons. You're coming to me to meet your physical needs, is what he's saying. Verse 27, do not labor for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures into everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal on him. Now, the Greek word here translated labor, where it says do not labor, is being used in the sense of not holding down a 9-to-5 job or a job, but more of striving for something. Okay, don't labor, don't strive for food that perishes, is what he's saying. Don't do everything you can just for that food. He's saying your focus should not be on your bellies, but on what will last. And he's saying the everlasting life. That's what you need to strive for, not the perishable things. And that everlasting life means salvation that only he can provide. Because he said, everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you. Because he always called himself the Son of Man, because God the Father set his seal on him. And he said, I will give you salvation. You need to come to me for salvation, not just for what fills your belly. And that's what he's telling them. Verse 28. Therefore they said to him, what shall we do? That we may work the works of God. And Jesus said to them, this is the work of God. You believe in him who has sent me, or whom he sent, is what he said. So, he's saying that the work of God, our first work of God is to believe on the one that he sent. And before we can do anything for God, we must first believe in Jesus. And because that's the one that God sent. And we have to believe, not just believing that Jesus was here, because even the demons believe in Jesus, but we have to believe that he is the Son of God, who so loved the world that he paid the death penalty due for us because of our sins. And then he rose from the dead on the third day to prove that he was God, he was deity, and that we will go to heaven because he first rose and went to heaven. That's what we need to believe about Jesus. That he took care of our sin on the cross, and then because he was raised on the third day, that proved he was God, and that we can now go to heaven to be with him. But to go to heaven, do we have to add anything to that? Do we have to work for anything? No. I mean, we do works, don't get me wrong, but salvation is a free gift. In Ephesians 2:8-9, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith. This is not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, so at least anyone should boast." We can't work for salvation, because if we work for it, then we can boast that we've earned it. And we don't earn salvation, because Jesus did all the work for us.
What is, you said,
Ephesians 2:8-9. And then Paul talked about boasting in Romans chapter 3, 27 and 28, where he says, "Where then is boasting? Is it excluded? By what law? Of works? No, but the law of faith. Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith apart from the works of the law." We can't keep the law. That's why Jesus came. We break the law. The 10 Commandments, we can't keep them. But that's why Jesus came. And so the law of faith keeps us from boasting. We put faith in the work that Jesus did, and that's how salvation works. Imagine, this is kind of a story. Imagine that you're on a death row. You committed some crime and you're on death row, and you're about to be executed. Just before the lethal injection or the electricity goes through, or whatever the form of execution is, the judge who justly sentenced you to death comes in and stops the execution, hands you his robe, and says, "I'm going to take that penalty for you." And so the judge takes the lethal injection or the electricity or whatever and dies in your place. And when someone sees you, knowing you were supposed to be executed, asks you, "Why weren't you executed?" Would you tell him, "Well, that righteous judge took my place because I held his robe"? Or would you say, "He took my place and that's why I'm here today"? That's how it is with Jesus. We're all on death row because of our sin. But Jesus, who is the righteous judge, says, "I will take their place for them." And so he came and took our place. So we can't boast of anything that we've done, because it was all done by the righteous judge. He took the place that was due us. And that puts goosebumps on me every time I think of that.
Isn't that amazing?
And it is amazing.
But you're an instrument for God, aren't you, when you pray for someone?
Well, yeah, God uses us.
Uh-huh.
But what it is God does the work. He just allows us to participate.
He doesn't need us.
Yeah, he doesn't need us, but he allows us to do. He allows us to.
I believe our love for him.
Yeah.
And our faith for him makes us want to do those works.
And because
And
we
it
love
encourages
him.
us because we want to, not
Exactly.
because we have to.
Okay, our works don't save us, but because we are saved, we want to do works.
Right.
There's a difference.
Right.
There are some religions that teach that you have to work, and they hope your good outweighs your bad, so you can go to heaven.
You gotta believe. I mean,
Right,
you gotta
yeah,
believe
yeah,
the person to get
right.
healed.
And that's what it
And if
is.
you believe in it,
And-
and then if it's not done like you want it to be, what happened there? I'm not living right when you do something wrong?
Well, we all do some stuff wrong, but what it is once we're saved, once we come to God, we want to do works, not to earn salvation. We want to do works because we love God. So we do these things because of our love for God, not to try to earn God's love. We do it because we want to love God, or because we love God, not because we want God to love us.
Okay, you love God, and then when he answers your prayer, don't answer it the way you want it. It's still God's will, not
It
yours.
is, and God answers it to the way that should have been answered to begin with. It may not be the way we want to, but it's the best way.
I'm trying to get that in my head.
Yeah.
I'm
All
trying
right.
to get it in my head.
But
He knows best.
yeah, God knows
And we have
best.
to trust that he knows best.
Yeah,
God knows
that's
best.
where faith comes in. We have to trust that God knows best.
Yeah, but what if I can
None of us are good enough. That's why Jesus did what he did, because we're not good enough.
Right.
You'll never be
Yeah.
good enough.
Our faith is that Jesus completed the work because we couldn't. We're not good enough. And our faith, we put our faith in Jesus because his sacrifice is what will save us, not us. Yeah, but him. It's all him. Yeah.
And the faith is that we believe that he was a perfect sacrifice, that he didn't sin, and that he sacrificed for us. And we believe, just like his story with the judge, we believe that, you know, the judge could take our place, and that he could save us from that horrible sin that we can't get away from.
Because God is a holy judge. He's holy. So he has to punish sin. There has to be punishment for it. But Jesus stepped in and said, I'm going to pay the fine that they owe. So now that Jesus paid the fine, God can say, okay, I can legally let you off now because the price has been paid. Jesus paid the fine. So our faith is in Jesus, that what he did was good enough to forgive us, to get us to heaven. Not by what we did, but what he did. Our faith in him is he was good enough to get us to heaven. And that's what putting faith in Jesus and his work on the cross is. Because if we put it in us, we're never good enough. But he is. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking to him and his work. His righteousness is what gets us to heaven. Yeah.
But usually what bothers her is that when she prays for somebody to be healed, they're not healed. She says, well, I prayed for them.
Yeah.
They should have got healed.
Well, God, and sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is wait. We don't always understand.
Yeah, it's good when he answers.
Yeah.
I'm happy about
Yeah.
that.
But we have to understand that God knows what he's doing.
It's not because your
Yeah.
prayers
It's
weren't
not because
good
of your
enough.
prayer.
No.
It doesn't have anything
Yeah.
to do with you. It has to do with God and God's plan and God's purpose. And God's ways are not our ways. We can't see things the way God sees them.
But for your prayer to be heard, you have to be in obedience.
Mhm.
This
If
is
you're not in obedience,
Right.
you're
Well,
not
that's
going to
what
be
I
heard.
say, you gotta live a perfect life.
Not a perfect
No.
life.
Perfect, but you have to be in obedience.
Yeah.
Or don't he say in the Bible that live perfectly like
Well,
I am?
Well, we have to strive to do that, but we're always going to fail. That's why Jesus had to come.
Our goal is to get
Yeah.
there. But
We're,
we will
none of
never
us are.
get there.
We all sin. We try to be holy. We try to do what's right,
But we can't get to the point.
but we
like
can't get to that
Jesus.
point. That's why we need Jesus.
We can't get to that point.
And you know, prayer for healing. I mean, it's, you know, sometimes God does heal, like he does, you know, did in the Bible. Sometimes he didn't.
Oh, that's right.
So, I mean, just because we pray for someone's healing and it doesn't come true, it's not because we didn't pray right. It's just because God chose not to.
And everybody dies.
Yeah. And sometimes-
is going to
Sometimes if they are a child of
be on
God
their deathbed
and
at some point.
they don't get healed and they die, well, they're better off with Jesus anyway, and their death sometimes leads others to Christ.
Yes.
We don't see the big picture.
Like Charlie Kirk.
Yeah. I mean, Charlie Kirk passed, you know, he got assassinated and died, and several people have come wanting to,
Not several. I would say
Hundreds of
many,
thousands,
Many.
yeah.
Acts 12:24, and I think
Yeah.
it's Luke 12:24.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, the
Mhm.
seed. that
Yeah.
falls,
Yeah, the weak
yeah.
falls.
And so, I mean, a death, you know, a death of a Christian, we know, well, you know, it's a sad thing, but sometimes there's a
But
great,
he's not God.
yeah, but sometimes there's a greater picture that we don't see. Could God have stopped the bullet that killed Charlie Kirk? Of course he could. But because of his death, many people, you know, thousands of people have come.
But before he died,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, there's
that
been a
have
lot of people.
died for Jesus Christ.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people,
A lot of people.
you know,
And
and,
only God knows
Yeah.
our heart.
and not one of those children of God who have died in vain. God had used that for some good. What the world meant for evil, God uses for good.
To bring more
Yeah.
people.
And so we don't always understand that. I want to try to get us to 36 before we get done. So, oh no, you're good. But 1 Corinthians, we're talking about works here. 1 Corinthians 3:9-15 says, "For we are both God's workers, and you are God's field. You are God's building. Because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder. Now others are building on it, but whoever is building on this foundation must be very careful. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one that is already laid, and that is Christ Jesus. Anyone who builds on that foundation may use a variety of materials: gold, silver, jewel, wood, hay, or straw. But on the judgment day, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if the person's work is of any value. If the work survives, the builder will receive an reward. But if the work burns up, the builder will suffer great loss. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through the walls of the flame. Now, this is not talking about the fire of hell. This is talking to believers. When we die, all our works, are going to be set out before us, and Jesus, the fire is going to be from Jesus' eyes, because he's going to gaze on all our works, and all the stuff not done for Christ is going to burn up. What was done for Christ is going to last, and he's going to take that and fashion a crown and put it on our heads. And that's what the Bible says. And so everything that we've done that is not for God is going to burn up. But everything we've done for Christ will last. And that's what this is saying. And but it's not talking about hell, because it says the builder will be saved, but will suffer loss from things that they've done that wasn't for Christ. So that's what we need to be, and this judgment's going to be from Jesus, and not on the white throne judgment that God does at the very end.
This is 2 Corinthians what?
This is 1 Corinthians 3, 9 through 15. Yeah.
Say it again.
1 Corinthians chapter 3,
Okay.
9 through 15.
Okay, thank you.
All right, verse 30. So he said to them, so they said to him, what sign will we perform then, that we may see and believe you? What work will you do? So they understood that Jesus was talking about himself, because they said, what signs will you do for us to believe? Now, I mean, I guess feeding them and all this kind of stuff, getting to the other side without a boat wasn't good enough. They wanted to see more. And verse 31 through 33 says, of John, it says, our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven. My Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Now, they brought up this manna because, once again, they were thinking the prophet, okay? And that's what, Jesus just fed them, and then they had the manna, so they kind of correlated those two. But they were still thinking physical. The manna fed them physically, Jesus fed them physically, and they were still wanted to be free from the bondage of the Romans. They were thinking all this physical stuff, but Jesus was trying to teach them heavenly or spiritual stuff, and they were not getting it. He started by clarifying that Moses didn't give them the bread, like they keep thinking. That it came from God, and God gives them another bread, not the bread that Jesus was fed them with, but he was talking about, I'm the bread. And going to verse 33 through 36, and this is, we're going to end it with this. It says, then Jesus said to him, then they said to him, Lord, give us this bread always. And Jesus said, I am the bread of life. The one who comes to me shall never hunger, and the one who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you also have seen me, and yet you do not believe. So Jesus is telling them, I am this bread. Come to me, and you're not going to, but he's still talking about hunger and thirst spiritually, not physical, because we all know we continue to get hungry, physically. I mean, we just had a great meal just now. But spiritually, Jesus said, you're going to have all the food you need, and that's in me. And you're going to have everlasting life. Jesus uses several statements, I am statements, that we're going to go through in the book of John. This is the first one, I am the bread of life. And, they're just not getting it. But once again, he's talking spiritual, not physical. You know, we still suffer, physically. With sicknesses, with hunger. With our finances. Sometimes we don't have the money, or whatever. We still suffer these things. We suffer from the outside world. We just talked about Charlie Kirk getting shot, but today there was a church in Michigan that got shot, and several people, kids and people were shot, and the guy burned the church down. That happened today. And so, I mean, we're going to suffer in this world, but Jesus says you don't have to do it alone. But keep your eyes on me, focus on me. This stuff out here will take care of itself. When a Christian dies, they blink right before they die. When they open their eyes, they're with Jesus. That's how quick it is. When they die, they're automatically with Jesus. But we need to reach a world that needs Jesus, and that's what Charlie Kirk did. He knew the risks, but he still, every one of his debates he always pointed it back to Christ, and that's what we need to do as well. We need to point it back to Christ. All right. Well, that's all I have. Let's go ahead and pray.